The first human ships arrived at the Ring of Voices on a Tuesday, though no one in the galaxy cared what day it was on Earth. 3 small vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and drifted toward the massive station that floated in the center of the Concorde's territory. The station was enormous. It was built from white metal and blue crystal, spinning slowly like a wheel in the dark. Thousands of ships from hundreds of species docked along its edges. The human ships looked like toys beside them. Admiral Bake Jacek stood on the bridge of the lead ship and looked through the viewport at the station. He was 63 years old, his hair was gray and cut short, and his face carried the kind of lines that came from decades of difficult decisions. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth before the planet united under one government. Now he was leading humanity's first step into the galaxy. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply looked at the station and said to his crew, "Remember, we are guests here. Act like it." The docking process took 2 hours. The Concorde systems were not designed for human ships. Their engines ran on different fuel, their communication signals used different frequencies, and their hulls were denser than anything the station's scanners had seen before. A docking officer from a species called the Ilhari, tall, thin beings with 4 arms and pale silver skin, contacted them and asked why their ships were so heavy. Jacek told him it was because humans came from a heavy world. The officer paused, then laughed softly before cutting the channel. That was the first laugh. It would not be the last. Kwan Unji led the diplomatic team through the station's corridors. She was 41, with black hair pulled back tight and a calm face that gave away nothing. She had spent 15 years as a diplomat on Earth, negotiating between nations that hated each other. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous thing in any room was not anger. It was pride. And this station was full of pride. Every species they passed looked at them, some with curiosity, most with amusement. Humans were short compared to nearly every species on the station. They walked with heavy steps because their muscles were built for a world with stronger gravity. Their bones were thick. Their movements were slower than the graceful, long-limbed aliens around them. A group of Velhari, the galaxy's dominant species, watched them pass from an upper balcony. The Velhari were tall and beautiful, with smooth dark blue skin and golden eyes. One of them pointed at the humans and said something that made the others laugh. Unji heard it. She kept walking. The assembly chamber was the largest room any human had ever stood in. It was a perfect sphere, with seats carved into every surface. Hundreds of alien delegates sat in their designated sections, arranged by species and rank. The humans were given seats at the very bottom, near the floor, in a section marked for provisional observers. It was the lowest position in the chamber. Yunji sat down without complaint. When it was Earth's turn to speak, Yunji stood and walked to the central platform. A light followed her. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at the small human woman, standing alone in the middle of a galactic parliament. She bowed and introduced herself. She spoke clearly and simply. She said that Earth wished to join the Galactic Concorde as a full member. She said that humanity came in peace and hoped to trade, learn, and contribute to the galactic community. She said that Earth was a young civilization, but a determined one. Before she could finish, the Valhari delegate stood. His name was not important. What was important was his voice, loud, smooth, and dripping with amusement. He said that Earth was a small planet orbiting a dim star at the edge of the galaxy. He said that humans were gravity-crushed creatures from a world so heavy that it was a wonder they had ever learned to stand upright. He said that their ships were slow, their technology was primitive, and their lifespans were embarrassingly short. He looked around the chamber and asked, with a wide smile, whether the Concorde had ever accepted a species that still measured its history in mere thousands of years. The chamber laughed. Not all of them, but enough. The sound echoed off the curved walls and fell down on Yunji like rain. She stood still. She waited for the laughter to stop. Then she smiled, a small, polite, perfect smile, and said, "Thank you for such a warm welcome. Earth looks forward to learning from all of you." She returned to her seat. Jisok, watching from the balcony above, saw her hands. He had seen soldiers shake before battle, but Unji's hands did not move. He respected that. Earth was granted provisional observer status. It meant nothing. They could watch. They could not vote. They could not propose. They could not trade on equal terms. They were furniture in the room. That night, in their quarters on the station, Jisuk and Unji sat across from each other at a small table. Jisuk poured water into 2 cups. "They will not take us seriously," he said. "Not now, maybe not ever." Unji picked up her cup. "Good," she said. "Let them laugh. Laughter makes people careless." 3 floors below them, in a small lab she had claimed as a workspace, Nari was not laughing, and she was not resting. She was working. Nari was 35, thin and sharp-eyed, with the kind of restless energy that kept her awake for days when a problem caught her attention. She was Earth's leading gravitational physicist, and she had spent every hour since arriving on the station studying its technology. She had scanned their engines, their shields, their weapons, their power systems. She had read every publicly available technical document in the Concorde's library, and she had found something that made her heart beat faster. No species in the galaxy had developed gravity manipulation technology. They used anti-gravity for movement and construction, simple push and pull systems that were ancient and unchanged. But no one had ever tried to weaponize gravity itself. No one had tried to bend it, focus it, or crush with it. To them, gravity was just a background force, a nuisance, something to cancel out. To Nari, gravity was everything. She had grown up on Earth, where gravity pressed down on every living thing every second of every day. She understood its weight, and now she understood that the entire galaxy had overlooked the most fundamental force in the universe. She sat alone in the dark lab, the glow of her screen lighting her face, and typed an encrypted message to Earth's Science Council. It read, "They have no gravity tech, none of them. We have something they have never even imagined." She sent it. Then she leaned back in her chair and looked up at the ceiling. Somewhere above her, a galaxy full of species was laughing at her world. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Laugh now." 5 years passed. On the surface, nothing about Earth changed. The human delegation still sat in the lowest seats at the Concorde. They still paid triple tariffs on every trade deal. They were still excluded from security meetings, military briefings, and technology exchanges. When Quan Unji raised objections, she was told that provisional members did not have the standing to complain. She nodded politely every time. She filed every rejection. She remembered every name. But beneath the surface, Earth was changing in ways no one in the galaxy could see. The project was called Operation Falling Star, and it lived in a research facility buried deep under a mountain range in the southern part of Korea. The facility had no official name. It did not appear on any map. 3,000 of Earth's brightest scientists and engineers worked inside it, and none of them were allowed to leave until the project was complete. Nari led them all. She had returned from the Concorde station with a fire in her chest that had not gone out. She had spent 5 years turning that fire into something real. The first breakthrough came in year 2, a device the size of a car engine that could generate a focused gravitational field strong enough to crush a steel beam into a flat sheet. Nari had watched the test from behind reinforced glass. When the beam folded like wet paper, she had not cheered. She had simply written in her notebook, "It works. Make it bigger." By year 4, they had built 3 things that would change the galaxy forever. The first was the gravity lance. It was a weapon that could project a crushing gravitational well at a target up to 10,000 kilometers away. Anything caught in the well would experience gravity hundreds of times stronger than Earth's. Ships would crumple. Stations would fold. Even energy shields, which were designed to stop plasma and kinetic rounds, could not stop gravity. Gravity was not an attack. It was a condition. You could not block a condition. The second was the mass shield. It worked on a simple principle. Bend the gravity around a ship so that incoming fire curved away from the hull. Plasma bolts, missiles, railgun slugs, all of them followed the path of least resistance, and gravity decided what that path was. A ship protected by a mass shield did not dodge. It simply existed in a place where attacks could not reach. The third was the ship itself. They called it the Anvil. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was a block of dense metal and reinforced plating, built heavier than any vessel in the galaxy. Where alien ships were designed to be light and fast, the Anvil was designed to be heavy and unbreakable. Its hull could withstand gravitational forces that would tear any other ship apart. It moved through gravity wells the way a stone moves through water, not gracefully, but with absolute certainty. Captain Han Do-hyun was chosen to command it. He was 44, quiet, and had a reputation for being impossible to rush. He never raised his voice. He never made quick decisions. He studied, he waited, and then he acted with a precision that left no room for mistakes. His crew respected him, not because he was loud or inspiring, but because he was always right when it mattered. He had a saying that he repeated so often it became a joke on the ship. Gravity is patient, so are we. He spent 6 months training his crew inside the Anvil. They ran simulations day and night. They practiced fighting in heavy gravity, maneuvering through gravitational fields, and operating systems that no other species had ever built. Shin Tae-ho, the chief engineer, slept in the engine room more often than in his quarters. He was 38, loud where Do-hyun was quiet, and he talked to the ship's systems like they were living things. He would pat a console and say, "Good girl, keep that reactor steady," and somehow it felt like the ship listened. While Earth built its weapons in secret, the galaxy continued to rot. The Velhari Dominion had grown bolder. In the 3rd year, they annexed the home system of a species called the Marathi, small, peaceful beings who had never owned a warship. The Concord held an emergency session. Delegates spoke passionately about justice and sovereignty. Then they voted. The result was nothing. No action, no sanctions, no aid. The Marathi were abandoned. In the 4th year, the Velhari took another system. This time it belonged to the Taloon, a species known for their art and music. The Taloon ambassador begged the Concord for help. He stood in the center of the chamber and wept. The Velhari delegate watched him with a smile. Nothing. Unji watched both votes from her observer seat. She could not speak. She could not vote. She could only watch. After the second vote, she returned to her quarters and sat in silence for a long time. Then she opened a secure channel to Admiral Jisok on Earth. "They will come for us eventually," she said. Jisok, sitting in his office in the United Navy headquarters, nodded slowly. "I know. How long do we have?" "A year. Maybe 2. They are moving toward our sector." Jisok leaned back in his chair. He was 68 now, and his body was tired, but his mind was not. "Then we will be ready," he said. He paused. "Are the weapons ready?" Nari says yes. "And the satellites?" Tae-ho deployed the last batch 2 months ago. 47 gravity generators hidden in asteroid fields, along every major transit route into our space. No one has found them. Jisok allowed himself a rare smile. "Good." That same week, on the far edge of human space, a Velhari scout ship was conducting a routine survey of an asteroid field. It was a small vessel, crewed by 12. It found something odd. A device attached to a large asteroid, hidden in its shadow. The device was small, dark, and gave off no energy signature the scout sensors could identify. The crew reported it to their captain. The captain ordered a closer look. The device activated. The scout ship shuddered. Its hull groaned. Every alarm on the bridge screamed at once. The crew felt themselves grow heavy, impossibly heavy. Their bodies pressed into their seats. Their bones ached. The ship's frame bent inward, as gravity around it increased 100-fold in less than a second. The captain tried to send a distress signal, but his arms would not move. The ship folded. Metal screamed. Then silence. On the anvil, drifting quietly in deep space, Shin Taeho watched his console. A small light blinked once, then went dark. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he leaned back and whispered to himself, "Test successful." He recorded the data, encrypted it, and sent it to Nari. Then he looked out the viewport at the endless black, and felt the quiet hum of the ship beneath his feet. The anvil was ready. The weapons were ready. Earth was ready. Now they just had to wait. And if there was one thing that humans had learned from living on a heavy world, one thing that gravity had taught them above all else, it was how to carry weight and how to wait. The demand arrived on a cold morning. It came through official Concord channels, stamped with the golden seal of the Velhari Dominion, and it was addressed directly to Earth's diplomatic office. Kwan Inji read it at her desk on the Ring of Voices. The language was polite. The meaning was not. The Velhari Dominion was requesting that Earth surrender 3 colony worlds on the outer edge of human space. The document called it a border adjustment for regional stability. It listed technical reasons, trade route optimization, resource management, security concerns. But Inji had been a diplomat long enough to read between the lines. Those 3 systems sat on top of a mineral vein that the Velhari had been eyeing for years. The colonies were home to nearly 200,000 people. Farmers, miners, teachers, children. The Velhari wanted the ground beneath their feet, and they did not care what happened to the people standing on it. Unji sent the document to Admiral Jisak on Earth. He read it once, then read it again. Then he called Captain Dohyun aboard the Anvil. Then he called Yoon Nari in her mountain laboratory. The 4 of them spoke on a secure channel for 2 hours. When they were done, the decision was made. 3 days later, Unji stood in the center of the Concord Assembly Chamber. The same chamber where she had been laughed at 5 years ago. The same curved walls, the same hundreds of alien faces looking down at her. But something was different this time. She was not asking for membership. She was not requesting a trade deal. She was answering a threat. She spoke calmly and clearly. She said that Earth had received the Velhari Dominion's request. Then she looked directly at the Velhari section of the chamber, where the delegates sat in their fine robes with their golden eyes. And she said 5 words that made the entire room go silent. Earth does not surrender its people. No one moved. No provisional species had ever refused the Velhari. Not in 400 years. The silence stretched for 10 long seconds before the Velhari's senior delegate rose from his seat. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He said that Earth should reconsider. He said that the Dominion's patience was generous, but not unlimited. He said that refusal would have consequences. Unji smiled her small, polite smile. Earth understands consequences, she said. We have lived with them our entire history. She returned to her seat. The chamber erupted into noise, delegates shouting, whispering, arguing. But Unji sat quietly, with her hands folded in her lap, and her back straight. Now, the soldiers would do theirs. Overlord Dreth received the news of Earth's refusal in his private chamber aboard the Velhari capital station. He was tall even by Velhari standards, with skin so dark blue it was almost black, and eyes that burned like liquid gold. He had ruled the Dominion for 60 years. He had crushed rebellions, annexed worlds, and broken species that were older than human civilization. Earth's refusal did not anger him. It amused him. A heavy little world, barely out of its own atmosphere, daring to say no to him. He almost admired it. He ordered the Third Grand Fleet to mobilize, 400 warships. It was the largest fleet the Dominion had moved in over a decade, and it was more than enough to destroy Earth's entire military 10 times over. Dreth did not expect a battle. He expected a surrender the moment the fleet appeared on Earth's doorstep. The show of force was the point. He wanted every species in the galaxy to watch and remember what happened when someone refused the Velhari. News of the fleet's mobilization spread across the galaxy within hours. On the Ring of Voices, alien ambassadors scrambled to contact Earth's delegation. Most of them urged surrender. One ambassador from a species called the Fenshi, a small, nervous people with large dark eyes, came to Unji's office personally. He sat across from her and wrung his 4 hands together. "You must give them what they want," he said. "The Third Fleet destroyed the Marathi in 6 hours. Your people will not survive." Unji offered him tea. He refused. She poured herself a cup and took a slow sip before answering. "We appreciate your concern," she said, "but Earth has made its decision." The ambassador stared at her. "You are brave," he said quietly, "but bravery does not stop plasma fire." Unji set down her cup. She looked at him with eyes that were warm but absolutely steady. "No," she said, "but gravity does." The ambassador left confused. He would understand soon enough. On Earth, the military moved fast. Admiral Jisok activated the full defense protocol. Every gravity satellite that Shin Taeho had hidden along the transit routes into human space was brought online and set to standby. The Anvil, along with 29 other warships, each one equipped with gravity lances and mass shields, moved to the border system where the Velhari fleet was expected to arrive. 30 ships against 400. The numbers were absurd. But Jisok was not counting ships. He was counting something else entirely. Captain Do-yeon stood on the bridge of the Anvil and watched his crew prepare. They were calm. He had trained them to be calm. Panic was a luxury for species that had never felt real weight on their shoulders. Humans were born under pressure. They lived under pressure. And now they would fight under pressure. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. His voice was steady, low, and carried the kind of quiet authority that made people stop and listen. "They are bringing 400 ships," he said. "They think numbers are everything. They have never fought anything like us. They have never felt what we are about to do to them. When they arrive, they will expect us to run. We will not run. We will stand exactly where we are, and we will show them what gravity means." He paused. Then he added, "Gravity is patient. Today its patience ends." Nari stood beside him on the bridge. She had left her laboratory for the first time in months to be here. Her gravity lance systems were installed on every ship in the fleet, and the satellite network was her design. If this battle was a weapon, she had built it. She looked at Do-hyun and said, "The field is ready. The satellites are in position. When they drop out of light speed, they will fly directly into the web." Do-hyun nodded. "Good." Taeho's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "Reactor is at full power, Captain. The Anvil is heavy and happy. Let them come." Jisok, watching from Earth's command center thousands of light years away, tracked the Velhari fleet on a massive holographic display. 400 blue dots moving in perfect formation toward human space. He watched them approach the border, watched them prepared to drop out of faster-than-light travel, and he felt something he had not felt in years. Not fear. Not excitement, just the steady, heavy certainty that everything was about to change. The Velhari Third Grand Fleet dropped out of light speed in a flash of blue energy. 400 warships appeared in the border system in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming, their weapons hot, their crews confident. They expected to see a planet begging for mercy. They expected to see a species ready to kneel. Instead, they saw a single ship. The Anvil sat alone in the center of the system, dark and heavy and unmoving. It looked small against the vastness of space. It looked like nothing. Dohyun opened a communication channel. His face appeared on every Velhari screen, a human face, calm and unremarkable, with dark eyes that held no fear. He said, "Welcome to Earth's space. I recommend you adjust for gravity." The Velhari commander laughed. It was the last easy laugh anyone in that fleet would ever have. The Velhari commander's name was Overlord Vashran, and he had commanded fleets for 30 years without ever losing a single engagement. He looked at the lone human ship sitting in the dark and felt nothing but pity. One ship. These creatures had sent one ship to face 400. He almost considered letting them retreat out of mercy. Almost. He gave the order to advance. The Third Grand Fleet moved forward in a wide crescent formation, their standard attack pattern designed to surround and overwhelm. 400 ships began closing the distance, their weapons charging, their shields glowing with a faint blue light. On every bridge in the fleet, the crews were relaxed. Some were already talking about how quickly this would be over. They crossed the threshold at exactly 1400 hours Galactic Standard Time. Nari pressed a single button on her console aboard the Anvil. 47 gravity satellites, hidden across the system, activated at the same moment. The satellites were small, dark, and scattered across asteroid fields and debris clouds in positions that Nari had calculated over 3 years. Together they formed a web, an invisible net of gravitational force that covered the entire engagement zone. The effect was immediate. The first thing the Velhari crews felt was a pull. Not strong at first, just a gentle tug, like someone had shifted the floor beneath their feet. Then it got worse. Pockets of extreme gravity bloomed across the fleet's formation like invisible storms. Ships that had been flying in perfect lines suddenly lurched sideways, dragged toward gravity wells they could not see and could not detect on their sensors. Navigation systems screamed warnings that made no sense. Engines that had been running perfectly now strained against forces, pulling them in directions they were not designed to handle. The smaller ships suffered first. Corvettes and frigates, light, fast vessels with thin hulls, were caught in the strongest wells. Their frames groaned and twisted, metal bent. Crews were pressed into their seats by forces 3, 5, 10 times their normal gravity. Some ships simply crumpled, folding inward like crushed cans, their hulls collapsing under the weight of something their builders had never imagined. Dozens of ships died in the first 30 seconds without a single shot being fired. The larger ships fared better, but not by much. Cruisers and battleships had stronger hulls, but they were still built for the weightless ease of space. They had never been designed to fight gravity itself. Their formations broke apart as each ship was pulled in a different direction. Captains shouted orders to regroup, but regrouping required engines, and engines were fighting against invisible hands that pulled and twisted and would not let go. And then the Anvil moved. Captain Dohan gave the order calmly, "All ahead full. Take us into the field." The Anvil's engines roared, a deep, heavy sound that vibrated through the entire ship, and the vessel surged forward directly into the chaos. Where every Velhari ship stumbled and strained, the Anvil moved with perfect stability. It had been built for this. Its hull was designed to operate in gravitational conditions that would destroy anything else. The gravity wells that crushed alien ships were nothing more than a familiar weight to the anvil. It moved through them the way a deep-sea creature moves through crushing ocean pressure. Naturally, effortlessly, at home. Dohin fought with a calm precision that terrified even his own crew. He used the gravity wells as weapons, steering enemy ships into the strongest pockets and watching them break apart. He used them as shields, positioning the anvil behind gravitational distortions that bent incoming plasma fire away from his hull. A Velhari battleship fired a full broadside at the anvil from close range. The bolts of superheated plasma curved around the ship like water flowing around a rock, and struck a Velhari cruiser on the other side. The cruiser exploded. The anvil did not even shake. The rest of Earth's fleet hit the Velhari from both sides. 29 ships dropped out of hiding positions behind asteroids and debris fields and attacked the flanks of the broken formation. Each human ship activated its mass shields, and the effect was devastating. Velhari weapons fire bent and twisted around the human vessels, hitting nothing but empty space. The human ships returned fire with gravity lances, focused beams of gravitational force that struck Velhari hulls and crushed them from the outside in. Overlord Vashran stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet die around him. His screens showed chaos. Red lights everywhere. Ships lost. Ships damaged. Ships drifting without power. His tactical officers were shouting about gravitational anomalies, about weapons they had never seen before, about forces that should not exist in open space. Vashran tried to rally his fleet. He ordered a concentrated assault on the anvil, sending 50 ships at the human vessel in a tight formation. Dohyun saw them coming. He turned to Nari. "Can we stop them?" Nari looked at her console. "I can do better than stop them." She adjusted the gravity satellite network, concentrating the fields into a corridor directly in front of the incoming formation. The 50 ships flew straight into a wall of gravity that increased exponentially with every kilometer. The ships at the front slowed, then stopped, then began to compress. The ships behind them crashed into the ones ahead. It was a pileup of warships, metal grinding against metal, hulls shattering under the combined weight of gravity and collision. Shin Taeho pushed the anvil's reactor beyond its safety limits. Warning lights filled the engine room. Alarms screamed. Taeho ignored them. He rerouted every spare watt of power to the main gravity lance and targeted the Velhari flagship. He looked at the reactor readings, patted the console, and said, "Just a little more, girl. One big push." The anvil fired its gravity lance at full power. The beam was invisible. Gravity had no color, no flash, no dramatic light. But its effect was the most dramatic thing anyone in that system had ever seen. A sphere of crushing gravitational force formed around the Velhari flagship. The massive vessel, 2 kilometers long, armed with enough weapons to glass a planet, began to fold. Its bow bent downward. Its stern twisted sideways. The hull cracked open along its spine, and the ship collapsed inward, like a building falling into its own basement. It took 4 seconds. Then the flagship was gone, replaced by a dense ball of twisted metal no larger than a house. Vashran did not survive. The Velhari fleet broke. There was no order to retreat. There was no one left to give one. Ships turned and ran in every direction, their crews desperate to escape the invisible fields that had torn their fleet apart. Of the 400 ships that had entered the system, fewer than 90 made it out. The battle lasted 41 minutes. On the Ring of Voices, the entire fight had been broadcast on every screen. The Concorde's monitoring systems had captured it all. The human ships moving through gravity fields that destroyed everything else. The Velhari fleet crumpling like paper. The flagship folding into nothing. Hundreds of alien species watched in silence. No one laughed. No one spoke. The chamber was as quiet as it had ever been. On the anvil, Dohyun sat in his command chair. His uniform was torn at the shoulder, where a console had exploded during the battle. Blood ran down his arm. He did not seem to notice. He looked through the viewport at the field of drifting wreckage, the remains of 400 warships turned into scrap metal by a force as old as the universe itself. Nari stood beside him. She was pale and exhausted, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. She looked at the same wreckage and felt something complicated: pride, relief, and a sadness she had not expected. That destruction was her work. Do-hyun spoke quietly, as if talking to himself. Gravity does not care how big you are. It pulls everyone down the same. Nari nodded. She had nothing to add. Across the galaxy, in his private chamber on the Velhari capital station, Overlord Dreth watched the battle footage alone. He watched it 3 times. The first time, he watched with disbelief. The second time, with growing horror. The third time, with the cold understanding of a ruler who had just seen the future of his empire change forever. He was not laughing. He turned to an aide standing in the doorway and whispered, "What have they built?" No one answered. The galaxy did not sleep that night. On 1,000 worlds, on stations and ships and colonies, scattered across 100 star systems, every species that had access to a screen watched the footage from the Battle of the Threshold. They watched it, and they did not understand. They watched it again, and they began to. The humans had not won with superior numbers. They had not won with faster ships or bigger guns. They had won by turning the most basic force in the universe, the force that held planets together and bent light around stars, into a weapon that no shield could block and no hull could survive. They had taken gravity, the thing that had crushed them on their heavy little world for their entire existence, and they had made it theirs. Within 12 hours of the battle, Kwon Eun-ji's office on the Ring of Voices was flooded with messages. Trade proposals, alliance requests, military pacts, technology exchanges. Species that had ignored Earth for 5 years were suddenly desperate to be its friend. Ambassadors who had laughed at her in the assembly chamber now waited in line outside her door. She let them wait. She made tea. She read every message carefully and responded to none of them for 3 full days. On Earth, Admiral Baek Ji-sek held a press conference. He stood behind a simple podium with the flag of the United Earth government behind him, and spoke to a planet that was still trying to absorb what had happened. He did not celebrate. He did not boast. He told the people of Earth that the battle was over, that their soldiers were safe, and that the threat to their colonies had been removed. He said that Earth had not sought this fight, but had refused to run from it. Then he said something that would be remembered for a very long time. We were born on a heavy world. They called it a disadvantage. They said our gravity made us slow, made us small, made us weak. They were wrong. Everything that made life hard on Earth, the gravity, the pressure, the weight on our backs from the moment we were born, that is what made us ready. The galaxy did not break us. It just gave us more to carry. And we have been carrying weight our whole lives. On the Ring of Voices, the Concord called an emergency full session. Every species sent its highest-ranking representative. The chamber was packed tighter than it had been in decades. When Eun-ji walked to the central platform, the room fell silent immediately. There was no laughter this time. There was no whispering. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the small human woman who stood exactly where she had stood 5 years ago, in exactly the same spot where she had been mocked. She looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates from species she had studied and respected and pitied over the years. Then she spoke. 5 years ago, I stood here and asked to join you. You laughed at us. You called us heavy-boned crawlers from a gravity-crushed rock. You gave us the lowest seats in this chamber and told us to watch quietly. She paused. Her voice did not waver. You were right about one thing. Gravity did shape us. It taught us patience. It taught us endurance. It taught us that the heavier the burden, the stronger you become. She took a breath. We did not come here to conquer. We did not build our weapons to rule. We built them because we had to. Because no one in this chamber stood up when the Marathi were taken. No one stood up when the Tolun lost their home. You were afraid. We understand fear. We have felt it our entire history. But we learned something about fear on our heavy world. You do not run from it. You stand under it. You carry it. And eventually, it makes you stronger than the thing you were afraid of. She looked directly at the section where the Velhari delegates sat. Their seats were half empty now. The ones who remained would not meet her eyes. Earth is offering something today, she continued. We will share our gravity technology freely, without cost, with any species that joins a new mutual defense agreement. We are calling it the Compact of Weight. It is simple. If one of us is threatened, all of us stand together. No more watching. No more voting to do nothing while our neighbors are swallowed. If you join, you will never face a threat alone again. The chamber erupted, not in laughter, in noise. Delegates shouting to their aides, calling their governments, arguing among themselves. Within 48 hours, 37 species had signed the compact. Within a week, it was over 70. Within a month, the Compact of Weight was the largest military alliance in galactic history, and it had been built by the species that everyone had dismissed as too small, too heavy, and too primitive to matter. The Velhari Dominion cracked. It did not happen all at once, but it happened fast. The species they had annexed, the Marathi, the Tolun, and dozens of others, rose up within weeks of Earth's victory. They had been afraid of the Velhari for centuries, but the Battle of the Threshold had shown them something they had forgotten was possible. Someone had fought back and won. Overlord Dreth tried to hold his empire together. He sent fleets to put down the rebellions, but his fleets were smaller now, and the rebels were no longer alone. Earth sent advisors. Earth sent technology. Earth sent the anvil. Dreth's empire shrank month by month. Trade partners abandoned him. Allies turned neutral, and neutrals turned hostile. The Velhari were not destroyed. They were still powerful, still proud, still dangerous. But they were no longer unchallenged. The galaxy had a new balance, and Earth sat at its center, like a stone at the bottom of a river, heavy and unmovable, and shaping the current around it. Admiral Gisiuk retired 6 months after the battle. He was 69, and his body had finally caught up with his years. At his retirement ceremony, he stood in front of his officers one last time and said, I spent my whole career fighting. On Earth, we fought each other. Then we fought for each other. And now, we fight for people we have never met, on worlds we have never seen. Because that is what carrying weight means. You do not put it down. You share it. He shook Do-Yun's hand last. He held it for a long time, and said nothing. Nothing needed to be said. Captain Do-Yun took the anvil on its next mission 3 weeks later. But this time, the ship was not going to fight. It was leading a convoy. 12 transport ships loaded with food, medicine, building materials, and gravity generators, to the Marathi homeworld, which had been stripped bare during the Velhari occupation. The Marathi had nothing left. Their cities were ruins, their people were starving, and a human warship, the same one that had crushed a fleet of 400, was now delivering aid to a species that most of the galaxy had forgotten. Nari was on board. She had designed a smaller version of the gravity generator specifically for planetary use, one that can stabilize tectonic activity, improve crop growth, and strengthen structures against storms. She called it a gift. The Marathi ambassador, when he saw the convoy approaching his shattered world, wept for the second time in the Concorde's history. But this time, they were not tears of despair. On the Anvil's bridge, Do-hyun stood at the viewport and watched the Marathi homeworld grow larger as they approached. It was a small planet, blue and brown, scarred but alive. Shin Tae-ho walked up beside him, wiping engine grease from his hands with a rag. "Captain," Tae-ho said, "do you think the galaxy will ever truly accept us? I mean, really accept us, not just fear us." Do-hyun considered the question. He watched the planet turning slowly below them. He thought about the laughter in the assembly chamber 5 years ago. He thought about Unji's steady hands, and Nari's quiet fire, and Jisok's tired, certain eyes. He thought about the weight of the world he had been born on, the world that had pressed down on him every day of his life, the world that had made him exactly strong enough for this moment. "They do not have to accept us," he said. "They just have to feel us." A small, rare smile crossed his face. "And trust me, they feel us now." Below them, the convoy began its descent toward the Marathi homeworld. The anvil held its position above the atmosphere, steady and heavy and unmovable, like the world that had built it. And across the galaxy, on 100 different worlds, species looked up at their skies and felt something new. Not fear, not awe, something deeper and harder to name. The steady, quiet, undeniable pull of a people who had been crushed by gravity their entire lives, and had never once thought to complain about it. A people who had taken the heaviest burden the universe could give them, carried it without breaking, and then turned it into the very thing that held the galaxy together. Gravity is patient.